Okay, so as you can see, this video is going to be very poorly made compared to my other videos, but that's because I want to get it out before Halloween, and this video has to come out in the time it takes by then. So yeah, and also I apologize for the mic quality, there's background noise, and I want to minimize it. But as you know, of course, it's the spooky month, and the spooky month is very spooky, and that's when everyone puts up all their stupid-ass Halloween decorations. Yeah. So, why am I making a video on the spooky month? Well, because it's the spooky month. It's spooky. But also because I think I can make something interesting out of this video. Today we're going to be talking about just the creepypastas and their stigma. So, yeah, if you don't like creepypastas and you don't like the scary nature of them, click off this video. But I mean, this video is basically making fun of creepypastas, but also saying why some of them are actually good. But yeah, here we go. So, what are creepypastas? Well, if you could describe it by me, basically they're short horror stories that are mainly focused on this one scary genre or topic to show a story, of course. And they're meant to be scary and they're meant to inflict a sort of like fear or scariness inside of someone. And yeah, this can lead to very interesting and unique creepypastas or these short horror stories. So, and you also have very famous ones, like Slenderman, Jeff the Killer, but of course, problem with those is that they're very outdated, and the writing of them is, well, if you look back at it today, you can tell that it was written by someone who just had some spare time to make a really good horror story. Now, the thing is, though, it's not like creepypastas are a seasonal thing like Halloween, where they can only come out on Halloween and only Halloween. No, they're made constantly, like, around the entire corner of the web. There are constant amounts of creepypastas being made. You can look at them on Reddit, yeah. And if you want to go even deeper than Reddit, well, you can go to the Roblox Creepypasta Wiki, which I wouldn't recommend doing, because your soul is going to physically leave your body, and you're going to become a Halloween decoration because of it. But sifting through this garbage and cancer and all this Chernobyl nuclear toxic waste, basically, are actual good creepypastas. And they're very few and far between because, well, there's very few of them because most creepypastas are just poorly made and poorly done stories that don't really have any sense of direction. And you can tell that the person who made it most likely doesn't have any like knowledge or skills on like reading or writing whatsoever. And then at the very far side of this garbage is, well, I mean, some of them are still garbage, but you have the really famous creepypastas, the one that pretty much a bunch of people know because, well, creepypastas in their own right, I mean, if you don't take them literally, then they're pretty much just a meme, but if you take them literally, then they're still a meme, but they're just a very scary one. But the very famous creepypastas are the ones that everyone knows, and you can probably name some of them off the top of your head. So, Slenderman, Jeff the Killer, and yeah. Now, the problem is, though, most of these creepypastas are very old and are pretty outdated, and you come from a different time of the internet. So, of course, they're going to be trash, but can we excuse it as trash? Or can we just excuse it as a time of when pretty much everyone didn't know what they were doing on the internet? Maybe. But these are very famous creepypastas because of the source material that they talk about. It's very accessible, and pretty much everyone can tell it to their friends. I mean, yeah, you could tell a horror story about this bald, like, tentacle monster that's ready to beat your ass and kill you because you took a bunch of pages from him. A literary monster, basically. But trust me, even with all the garbage out there, there are still plenty of good ones, and I want to just talk about why people shouldn't say that all creepypastas are garbage, because they aren't. There are plenty of good ones. I understand that a lot of creepypastas come off as very cliche and just stupid, but not a lot of them aren't, and they're very well made. Alright, so the thing that we call creepypastas, or scientifically called ethymology, is, well, it was invented in 2006 to 2007 on a little website called 4chan. Now, that is a very crazy website, and I wouldn't recommend going there. But, of course you wouldn't want to go there, it's full of spooky people. But anyways, yeah, it was coined on image board in 4chan around 2006 or 2007, and eventually it got, viral enough to spread to the rest of the internet. And eventually, when it was all fleshed out and people started making stuff for that term, well, it became even more popular. Now, the term creepypastas was invented by 4chan, but creepypastas, well, as a phenomenon, sort of, have been around for a really long time on the internet. Like, really long time. Like, since, the late 90s and early 2000s. The first one was called Ted the Caver, but it was posted on Angel Fire in 2001, and, well, it was, I mean, I'm gonna read it right now. Of course, judging by the title, it's about this guy who goes caving with his friends, and they explore this cave. However, things take a turn, and, well, his friends die. So, yeah. Now, creepypastas aren't usually written by professional and, of course, basically professional authors or horror story writers like Steve King, for example, or something. They're usually just written by normal people who just want to make a good story and maybe gain some experience from it. And of course, well, this has led to some interesting results where some creepypastas just completely suck ass. They don't really have a sense of direction or actual good grammar in the writing, and they really just they have a good concept and design, but they just don't land. On the other hand, you also have, of course, basically people who are really good at writing, or at least they just got lucky with their writing and can write a good story. And that's usually where the good creepypastas show up. Finding a good creepypasta is, well, I mean, it's good. I mean, you just feel great, and you feel like you actually are interested and invested in the story, and you feel like you want to see more out of this, well, creepypasta. So, how about we talk about, well, the community as a whole in terms of creepypastas? The creepypasta community is divided in many sections that, well, it's really hard to describe and they're hard to number. You have a lot of good sections where constant good creepypastas are being made, and you can always, look at them and tell a good story. And then you have the really bad section, as I mentioned. This can be desired as in Roblox Creepypasta Wiki. This thing does exist, and it's horrible. And, or if, just horribly written r/no sleep creepypastas. So you know what? How about we explore some of those r/no sleep creepypastas? One of my favorite creepypastas is a story about this guy who lives in a neighborhood that is really well off and has really good neighbors. But the catch is that every single night at 3 a.m., exactly 3 a.m., there's this thing that comes by every single person's window. No matter what perspective you're in, it always seems to be exploring your house exactly at 3 a.m. It always explores people's house at 3 a.m., and you can't look at it and you can't see it. If you see it, well, you're never the same. You turn into this husk of what was once your former self. You essentially become a zombie, or just a person with PTSD, essentially. And, well, it's a really good story, and I'd suggest giving it a read, so I'll link it in the description, because it's a really good story, so... I think that the reason this story is so compelling is because it touches on a common human fear, the fear of the unknown. But then again, that's sort of like the entirety of creepypastas in general. Most of them depict ideas of unknown things of unknown origin that don't make any sense and don't seem like they would actually exist in this human world. But in the stories, they do. And you don't really know how to explain them or where they came from because they're meant to be the main antagonist or main thriller of the movie or creepypasta. The fear of the unknown is something that we all irrationally have, whether you realize it or not. So, if you see something in the dark but really can't make out what it is, and it seems to be approaching you, well, of course you're going to be scared because you don't know what it is, you don't know how dangerous it is, you can't assess the danger because it's dark, and your eyes aren't really, well, that exposed to the darkness yet. So, you can't really make out what it is, so your natural instincts are to run and hide. And of course, in these stories, these things can be either be on a scale of like absolutely terrifying, you want to avoid them at all costs, or you literally have no way of surviving them if you're any other character in the story, or characters that are necessarily creepy, but they can be beaten somehow. One of the most famous creepypastas, Slenderman, is, well, it's about an unknown entity or creature. It's a 24-foot tall, scary-ass thing that has no face and tentacles. And it's usually depicted as someone or a thing that just kidnaps children and they're never seen again. It's scary because you don't know where it's going to be and when it's going to be. It's just going to be there when you see it. It's usually in the woods or just in a really dark environment. And you don't know how to escape it, and you don't know if you can even survive it or not. This thing could be totally faster than you, and usually it's depicted as being a lot faster and constantly following you when you're in the woods. So, the Slenderman game perfectly depicts this because you're supposed to collect 8 pages, and to defeat Slenderman or just win the game, you're supposed to collect all 8 pages. However, each time you collect each page, it gets more and more harder and more aggressive from Slenderman because he keeps getting faster to you and getting you in very specific spots. And you can't look at him either, so it's just about being scared that he's always following you and he's always getting near you and you don't know when he's going to show up. That's the perfect reason why creepypastas are just a wide spectrum of things. They can be so good and they can also be so bad. They're made by amateurs, but they're made with this creative idea that normally isn't explored in professional ideas. Now, how about we talk about creepypastas on other social medias or professionally made creepypastas? This is going to be probably my favorite part because, well, I have a really good favorited creepypasta that I'm pretty sure a lot of people know. One of my favorite, almost professionally made creepypastas is Local 58. It is, it's a really good feeling. And I mean that in a bad way, sort of, because it's supposed to be just unnerving and eerie, because at first it looks like a normal broadcast station, but then it slowly turns into what seems to be like this alien takeover that is trying to manipulate humans into killing themselves in order to, well, serve its own purpose. So, and the cartoons and obviously visuals of Local 58 perfectly encapsulate this. Now, professionally made creepypastas are, well, they're also few and far between because, well, they're professionally made. Most people do not know how to make a really good creepypasta that has deep lore and deep complex meanings to its story. But I mean, isn't that the great part about creepypastas? Finding the good, really complex and really well meaningful creepypastas that really make you question your own existence basically. I think that's the great part about creepypastas. They can have really interesting stories and yet they're not made by professionals. They're just made by amateurs. They just want to make something new and interesting and unique. That should be the standard for Hollywood and stuff like that. But sometimes you just feel like it isn't, and yet here are some amateurs making better stuff than most Hollywood writers. Doesn't that really make you think? Alright, I'm gonna end off on, well, just mainly about the most famous creepypastas and their influence on creepypastas as a whole. The most famous creepypastas are usually, of course, as I just mentioned, the ones that influence the entire genre as a whole. Smiling Dog, Slenderman, Jeff the Killer, Ben Drowned. They're very famous because of internet culture and the source material that they are based on. Jeff the Killer depicts the idea of a crazy kid, well, going crazy after he experienced many traumatizing things, and he kills his entire family. Slenderman explores the idea of feeling hopelessness, and being alone, but this thing is following you. And Ben Drown explores the idea that something could be hiding in your video game screen and, well, it could totally hack your life. And Smiling Dog, well, I looked up the creepypasta. I don't really know exactly what it tries to explore, but I don't know. Maybe it explores the idea that your dog is a horrible, this horrible mutation of a thing. Okay, guys, thank you for watching the video. Thank you for 100 subs as well. Yeah, and also happy Halloween, because that will be the date of when this video is hopefully uploaded and edited, because if it isn't, then screw myself. But, happy Halloween. I normally don't like talking about creepypastas because their reputation is sort of tarnished nowadays because, as I mentioned, there's a lot of bad creepypastas. they're mostly made by just unprofessional people who don't really know what they're doing. Now, I mean, yeah, eventually they'll get good at it, but it's not really enjoyable, to say the least. But I have experience as writing creepypastas, so I can see it from a different side. Please don't look at my creepypastas, they're horrible, please don't.